Welcome to Time and Delight Edibles. My name is Liz. If this is the first time you're joining, if you're a regular subscriber, welcome back. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your support. I really do mean that. I love you guys. So today I'm going to show you how to do the sour version of a gummy candy. So this includes the gelatin and a cooked syrup, candy syrup. You combine them, and we then apply the sugar, sweet and sour sugar, right afterwards. So we don't have to wait for it to dry or to figure out when we need to add it. We add it right afterwards. And Alright, so I'll just get right started. We'll get into the ingredients, the equipment that you're going to need, and then how to put everything together. Alright, well thank you so much for joining, and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so this recipe is done in 2 stages. Well, technically 3, because we cook in 2 different stages and then we combine everything. So for the first gelatin, for the jell-o half, you're going to need 3 tablespoons or 3 envelopes of unflavored gelatin, 1 box of your favorite jell-o flavor, a 1/4 cup of light corn syrup, a 1/2 teaspoon of citric acid, a 1/2 teaspoon of guar gum, and a 1/4 cup to a 1/3 cup of your Cannabutter. And for the liquid, you're going to need a 1/4 cup that we're going to heat up to boiling, and then a 1/2 cup that we're going to be using to bloom our gelatin. And you can use any liquids that you like. I like to use these Kool-Aid or the Kool-Aid Jammers. These ones are good because they're a water base and they're clear, so you don't have to contend with color, and they're also half the sugar. So again, you're not going to, it helps cut back on the sugar since we got a whole ton of it in it. That's totally up to you though. You want to definitely stick to a clear type liquid. Those Powerades, if you like those type of things, those vitamin waters if you like them. I don't like them. They do not add the greatest of taste. But if you do add juices like with it have real fruit juice in it, then you're going to want to use a mold inhibitor, because mold will develop very quickly. And if you want to add additional colors or flavors, we can do that. I'm going to be adding Tutti Frutti, and so I'm going to kind of make it pink and purpley, I don't know, Tutti Frutti colors. And if you want to have a nice solid background, you're going to need white food coloring. So that's for the gelatin part, the jell-o side, gelatin side. For the cooked candy syrup, you're going to need 1 cup of sugar, a 1/2 cup of light corn syrup, and a 1/2 cup of water. So for the equipment that you're going to need a double boiler, so you can use any pot and metal bowl. I like to try and use a thicker metal so that it doesn't get too hot. You're going to want something to disperse your candy. I love using these bottles. They work great, and they've got the piping tip, which makes it really nice. Or you can use an eyedropper. Now this recipe is a little bit thicker, so I'm not sure how well an eyedropper is going to work with it. You're also going to need timber. You're also going to need a smaller pot for your sugar syrup and a candy thermometer, 2 spatulas. You're also going to need a hand blender, and if you're going to be splitting your syrup either by doing different colors or flavors, you're going to need a measuring cup to split that out. If you're just doing all one, you don't need that. Or in lieu of a hand blender, you can use a whisk and a very strong forearm. So the first thing that we want to do is we are going to bloom our gelatin, and we are going to heat up that other 1/4 cup. You may need a little bit more liquid. If you do, you can just add it later on if needed. So we're going to heat this up in the microwave for about 1 minute and 20 seconds. And we're going to sprinkle 3 tablespoons of gelatin, unflavored gelatin, onto our 1/2 cup of liquid. You want to kind of evenly spread it. And then you're going to mix it in so that it is thoroughly mixed and that there are no lumps. So you want it to kind of look like you want it to look like applesauce. And then you're going to just set that aside for 5 minutes. And we are going to add our boiling liquid to our jell-o mix. And you're going to stir that. Oh, and you're going to put your heat on to the lowest setting. We just want our water to get hot. We don't want it boiling. Gelatin melts at just hot water, so we just want a hot water bath. And we're going to stir that in, and we're going to add in our corn syrup. That's our 1/4 cup of corn syrup. And we're just going to stir, and we're going to add in our 1/2 teaspoon of citric acid. And we're going to stir that, I said, until it's dissolved. And it takes about 5-6 minutes or so for all of that to melt. And in order to get this stuck gelatin off the side, you can use some very hot water and a brush, and you can wash that off. Otherwise, if you don't, it doesn't melt, and then you'll get bits and stuff in your jell-o. Then you also want to make sure when you're stirring is to rub your spatula across the bottom, because the sugar and the gelatin can stick to it, and you don't want that. So you want to make sure you can feel it smooth on the bottom. If there's stuff stuck, you'll feel it kind of rough. You just kind of want to work it off, scrape it off. Then once your your jell-o is fully melted, we're going to add in the gelatin. And then what I do is I just kind of cut it up into smaller pieces, just like this. And just, in she goes. And you're just going to gently stir that until it's melted. And if your water is hot now, if your pot's nice and hot, you can turn off the heat. Gelatin doesn't require much heat at all to melt, and if it gets too hot, the gelatin will break, which means it's not going to have that. Your candies aren't going to set that well. And the sign that you'll know that it's too hot is if you start to see white foamy stuff happening on the top of your mixture here on your syrup. Now that everything is melted, we are going to add in the Cannabutter and our guar gum. And the reason that we have to use guar gum is it is an emulsifier, and it is going to allow your oil and your water to come together as one liquid, versus being oil and water, don't mix together. An emulsifier allows them to come together as one solidified unit. In short, it basically mushes the oil and the water together to live happily. Now we're going to pour in our Cannabutter. And I've used 1/3 cup. So as you can see, adding the Cannabutter, our oil, to our gelatin, you can mix and mix and mix until the cows come home. No matter what, those two are never going to blend together. Now you might get the appearance, if you kind of whisk really, really quickly, you have the appearance that it's combined, right? That kind of looks like that's all combined. However, if you go and you set that, if you went to set that up now, all of the butter would raise to the top of the mold. Now, if you've got one of these little strainers or a strainer, it's great for doing the guar. So we're going to use 1/2 teaspoon of guar gum, and you're going to gently evenly sprinkle it over the top. If you don't have a strainer, you just want to make sure to try and get it evenly over the top there. This will adhere to the oil and allow it to mix in with the jell-o. And I'm going to let that sit for a minute. And now we're going to get our trusty hand blender, and we start mixing that in. And you'll continue to mix that until it is completely all one color, all one unified color. You don't see any kind of streaking or any difference whatsoever. That's when you know it is fully blended and emulsified. And you're going to be happy about that texture. And once that's done, we're just going to let that set aside and leave it on the hot water, but turn off the heat, and then we're going to do our candy syrup. Alright, so for our candy syrup, so for the candy syrup, you want 1 cup of sugar, a 1/2 cup of corn syrup, and a 1/2 cup of water. You're going to mix that together until it is till it's all mixed up and your sugar's starting to dissolve. And we're going to turn the heat on to medium-high. And you're going to stir the syrup until it begins to boil. So as soon as it starts to boil, then you are going to stop stirring. That's when we add the candy thermometer and we don't stir it again. And then you're also going to want to grab a jar of hot water, something of hot water, and a brush so you can wash down the sugar crystals off of the side, and that'll prevent your syrup from crystallizing. Once it begins to boil there, we're going to add our candy thermometer. I'm going to try to add the candy thermometer. Now, if you ever wonder why I kind of have this weird looking thing, the one that I have setting on it, that thermometer doesn't always work for me. It occasionally will fail. I like the digital, but the digital doesn't have any way of holding on to it. It's more meant for just kind of sticking it in and checking a temperature. And then I have to use the tin foil to protect the digital from the heat. So that's why I kind of have this weird makeshift candy thermometer. And we're going to cook this syrup to 208, just 280 degrees, soft crack. Now you can go a little bit, if you want your candies a little less chewy, you can go a few degrees less. You can go to about 275. If you want them a lot chewier, then you can go to 300. I seem to find the 280 is perfect for it. Well, for what my liking anyway. So we're going to continue to cook that syrup until 280 degrees. And just remember to wash down any sugar crystals that may form on the sides. And just to let you know, if you were doing this at the medium-high, it will go fairly quickly, so don't leave the kitchen. Normally you do the sugars at a lower temperature, so you have a little bit of time. Doing it at the higher temperature, it will go very quickly. So I'm telling you, don't leave your kitchen. And then you also want to get a pot of just cold water, or a bowl of cold water, standby. We're going to put the bottom of the pot in that to stop the cooking process. So we're at 276, 270. See how quickly it starts to go? 278, 279, 280. Leave the candy thermometer on because we want to bring this temperature down to 240. You can turn your heat off. Leave it in the water until the temperature starts coming down. And then we're just going to set it on the side here until that temperature comes down to 240. So once your temperature comes down, you can remove the candy thermometer. And we're going to add in, ow, be careful, the syrup is still very, very hot. You're going to get your gelatin mixture. And you're going to have a look, and you're going to make sure that you don't see any green or any butter separation. Now you might see a little bit of, like, see how that color there difference? That's just your jell-o that the air is coming out of. So don't worry about that. What you care is if you see any kind of green or oily looking. So that's good. We're going to pour this into this candy syrup. And be very careful when you're stirring this. Now your gelatin is going to be a lot more liquidier than the liquidier. I know, I come up with my own words. Then the candy syrup is going to be thicker. It's also going to start to solidify, as you can see on the spoon. So that's why you're going to gently stir it, and we're going to turn the heat on to the lowest temperature. And you want to make sure to take your spatula and go all the way around the edges. The syrup has a tendency to stick along those edges. See? So I like to use the hand blender, whoops, to make sure that everything is fully mixed together and blended. And emulsified. And then you're just going to gently stir to make sure that it's all nicely mixed. So now at this point is when we're going to add in our flavor and additional colors if you like. Or as I said, if you're not doing that, you can just go ahead and put this into your bottles right now and get ready to distribute into the molds. So I'm going to be adding one of my newest favorite flavors, Tutti Frutti. Love this flavor. So I usually use about 1.5 cups. And again, you just want to gently get that all mixed in. Now, if you are going to be splitting, if you want to do 2 different colors, this point you're going to put it transfer it over to your measuring cup and split it in half. Or if you wanted to do 2 different flavors, then do that before, split it in half, add your different flavors. But I'm just doing 1 flavor based, 2 colors. Okay, so I have got. Now, whenever you look at a measuring cup, always look at it straight on. Get down at the level and look at it straight on. If you look at it from a down level, you see you don't get an accurate reading. That looks like 2 1/4 cups. However, it's more like 2 1/3 cups. So for this one, I'm going to add some more red. And I like to use the no taste red. I hate the taste of red dye. I can always taste it in everything. So I like the no taste red. The one thing about it, however, is it doesn't have quite the intensity of red that the regular does. But I'd rather forsake a little bit of the intensity on the color versus the intensity on the flavor. There we go, that's a nice red. And the other side I'm going to do purple. I'm going to add in some pink. I want a more pinky purple versus a dark purple. And a couple drops of blue. Now mix that up, see what we get. Now, right now, because I didn't add the white into it, and it looks like it's a solid color, it's actually, it'll come out kind of still a little bit translucent. So if you want to get a solid background and that it's not going to lighten up or get that kind of clearer translucent look, you want that solid opaque, then you need to add in the white. So I'm going to add a couple drops into white on both sides. So when we add in the white, it's going to dull down our color a little bit. So that I'm just going to add in a little bit more of the red and add a little bit more to the purple. The purple I think I'm going to leave. I like that color. But the red looks kind of orangey. And see how much nicer that color is now? It's a lot richer. It gives you more of that solid background. Makes it opaque versus having that translucent look to it. And now I'm just going to get ready to pour it in the bottles and distribute it into the molds. Alright, so now we're ready to distribute into the molds. And you can go do half and halves. Now don't fill up your mold all the way to the top. If you do, it ends up leaving a sharp edge on your candy that dries out, and it doesn't make your candies very pleasant. So don't fill them all the way up to the top. And as also when you're trying to pour, try and keep it to the middle and just let it distribute it out. Once you have your mold set up, all filled up, you put it into the fridge for 2 hours. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer, basically 2 hours or until they're set. Alright, so it's been a couple of hours and our candies are ready to come out of the molds, and we're going to make up our sugar sour mix. So you're going to add 1 cup of sugar, And to that, you're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of citric acid. Set it, and you want to make sure to thoroughly mix that in so you're going to get even citric acid on everything, not just get like a big hunk of it on one candy. That's kind of gross. So you want to make sure to thoroughly mix it in. Now the nice thing with this recipe is as soon as we take them out of the molds, we're going to put them right into the sugar mix. You don't have to worry about waiting for them to dry or partially dry before we can add it. And the reason for that is citric acid is water soluble. So when you do the other gummy recipe, when you just take them out, they're still wet, and gummy bears are essentially water and gelatin. So as soon as there's any moisture on them, the citric acid will automatically begin to melt. It doesn't do it on this because you have the sugar coating or the sugar candy syrup in there that helps protect the gelatin, and that's why they don't melt as soon as you put it on. And that's why this recipe is way better for doing sour or sugar coated candies. Now these guys are going to be a lot stickier than your regular gummy recipe. So you just kind of pull it and they'll start to peel out, and then you just work them out and then just pop them right into your sugar sour mix. And as they warm up a bit, they will start to get a little more tacky. So no worries, as long as you can pull them out of the molds, they're good. And they do stick to your fingers. If they do, just kind of put it down into the sugar. You can just kind of rub it in, and it'll get them off. Well, that's nice. Once your sugar or your sugar sour mix is on, they no longer stick together. See, look at that. And then you just put them on the rack to dry as per usual. Now what I like to do is I like to put holes in my parchment paper, so that way you're getting air from both sides. It helps with drying. The other nice thing with this recipe is it doesn't take anywhere near as long for these to dry as the regular gummy recipes. They're pretty much dry in a few hours to overnight. Now, if they do start to get a little too warm and too hard to get out of the mold, just put them back in the fridge for a little while. If you actually keep a little bit of sugar on your fingers, once they get a little bit sticky, it'll help with them not sticking to your fingers. It'll aid with them coming off. See, if they stick, they will fuse. Let's just pull them apart. Now, if you're taking these out and they're just not coming out, they're way too sticky, they're too gooey, you can put them back in the fridge for a couple of hours. Or, and if you take them out and they're still not going to come out, what you can do is put them in the freezer for about an hour, take them out, put them back in the double boiler on low, remelt them, and add a 1/2 tablespoon to 1 tablespoon of bloomed unflavored gelatin. And that should add a little more gelatin there that'll fix that right up. And if you find that they are too gummy, oh, sorry, not if they're too gummy, if they're too chewy, they're like rubber bands, again, same thing, just put them back on the double boiler on low, remelt them, and add a couple of tablespoons of liquid to it, and mix it all in until it's all melted, recast them, and that should take care of that problem. If you've taken them out and there's your butter is all risen to the back, same thing, just put them into the double boiler, remelt them, add a little bit more gar gum, and re-emulsify. Make sure to use the hand blender or your whisk really, really well, like I showed you earlier. So again, if they're stuck like that, check first to see. Just gently work around. If they come away, then you're good. You can pull it out of the mold. But if they're doing that and it's not coming away at all, then they need to either go into the fridge longer, or to add some more gelatin to them. They are a little bit more work, but they are definitely worth it in texture, in flavor, in everything. I've pretty much abandoned the other gummy bear recipe personally. I just use this recipe now. I'll just do either sugar coated or the sweet or the sugar and sour mix. Option is if they are being really sticky, they are kind of coming out, they're set but they're just really sticky, that can happen because it picks up a little bit too much moisture in the refrigerator. You can just let them sit in the molds for a couple of hours on the counter before taking them out. That'll assist in drying that out a little bit. Now, if you can stand your candies up, it's a good idea. Some of them won't stand up, though, too small to whatever the size. So if you can stand them up, great. If not, you just want to flip them over every couple of hours till they're dry. And as I said before, this recipe and the drying time is it's a lot less time. And that's it for them. So just leave them out and enjoy some awesome sweet and sour gummy candies. So that's my tutorial on sweet and sour gummy candies. These are the little bad boys. I haven't dried yet, but you can see they're really nice. They're little squishy now because they're still wet. Taste awesome. So I hope you give this recipe a try, whether you want to do just sugar coated or the sugar sour. It's a great recipe. I'm sure that you'll love it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the comments. I'll always get back to you. And I think that's everything I've got for you today. Well, thank you so much for joining Diamond Delight Edibles. Wish I could get that straight. Thank you for joining Diamond Delight Edibles. It's been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.